Hello, and welcome to Wine with Wita, the podcast that is dedicated to engaging with health professionals and caregivers in meaningful discussions. I'm your host, Rita Shamoon, or as my clients call me, Wita. I'm a pediatric speech pathologist, and I am so excited to have you here. Each week, we deep dive into connecting you with caregivers and healthcare professionals, sharing their insights, stories, and key takeaways to help you with your child's diagnosis and your journey. Whether you are a parent, healthcare professional, a lifetime learner, or simply a wine enthusiast, you're in the right place. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy today's episode. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Wine with Wita. Today, I'm honoured to be chatting with Rose, a lived experience researcher in childhood disability, NDIS support coordinator, and passionate advocate for family empowerment. Rose is a mum to 2 boys. Her eldest, Eric, has a complex neuro-disability requiring 24/7 care, and her youngest son, Marcus. Balancing their very different needs has been a unique and powerful journey for her. She has been a key part of the ENVISAGE family team since its starting, helping shape the program and supporting families through both her lived experience and professional work. Our conversation today is about a vital but often overlooked topic: how parents and carers can care for themselves whilst caring for a medically complex child. Rose, thank you so much for joining me on Wine with Rita today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rita. Thanks for the lovely introduction too.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So, Rose, please tell the listeners about who you are in a bit more depth and what brings you to Wine with Wita today.
um, I guess who I am, that's a big question, but I suppose in terms of my sort of personal history, you've explained about, my son and my eldest born child, Eric, he's actually about to turn 20, which is a huge milestone in our family's life. And, you know, so prior to having kids, I went to university. I had a job. I thought, oh, I'll just go on maternity leave, get back to my job, and I worked in education, and just sort of thought that life would go the way I sort of had always dreamed and hoped, and it life did go in a way that has been very rewarding and beautiful and hard, and just like all families, you have that concept of where you're going to be. But I suppose things kind of derailed a little bit when my son was 4 months of age, and so it was a normal pregnancy, it was a normal childbirth. At about 4 months of age, my son started having seizures, and they were quite strong. They were on the hour, every hour, and it was just sort of came out of nowhere. And so we spent a lot of time in hospital trying to figure out what was causing it. And after it was probably only about a week, we discovered that he had been born with a brain malformation, and that's known as polymicrogyria. So it's an
Mhm.
overfolding of the cortex in the brain. And that overfolding of the cortex, sort of the gyria, the kind of little, what we see as those little worms, I suppose, when we see a picture of the brain.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so when those cells that are sort of meant to be stacked up like a brick wall, when the cells get a bit bent and a bit squashed, or the folding is kind of a little bit too tight, it can cause problems with, you know, signals going across the brain.
Yeah.
And so, given that at 4 months of age, that's when you start to build those pathways in the brain, that's when those problems start happening. So, the journey with Eric was really quite, it was quite a big change from having a newborn baby and doing all those newborn things, and then really just having this impact of severe epilepsy, and not really knowing, having a descriptive diagnosis of polymicrogyria doesn't necessarily tell you how your child's going to develop and
Mm.
what that prognosis is going to be. So you could have a child with polymicrogyria who's got a really tightly wound gyri on their brain, and they're walking and talking and, getting involved in everyday life experiences. And then you have some children, like my son Eric, who have a very small patch of this overfolding of the cortex, and that kind of just sets off a cascade of problems. So, starting with that, how do we deal with that epilepsy? And then it was, how do we deal with his feeding problems? And
Mm.
then, okay, he's not able to interact with the world, um, because we can't get his epilepsy under control, which was the main thing that we were dealing with in those early years. How is he going to learn? Is he going to ever walk or talk or all those sorts of things? So we were sort of faced with that situation of, okay, we think that there's an issue. We've identified a structural issue in your child, and we know that it's causing epilepsy, but we don't know what that is going to mean for you or your family.
How did that feel when you heard that phrase, but we don't know what that means? As a young mum, for me, I'm just reflecting, that would have been a very overwhelming and confusing time for you.
Oh gosh, the bottom fell out of the world, basically,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And I remember, because they take you into this room, and there's a tissue box on the table,
Oh,
and they say to you, this is what we've found. And so, part of you like, well, I've seen what I think is a seizure. I'd never seen one before, but okay. I guess with epilepsy, they give you epilepsy medication and then you go on your way.
mm.
So I didn't quite make that connection that they weren't going to find the medication that would fix my child. And then once his epilepsy was under control, then he would just start, everything would just go back to normal, because he
You
used to
reach his
feed,
milestones.
yeah,
Mm.
reach his milestone. So he so it was quite a severe drop. So from a child who was, say, 4.5 months of age, who was laughing and interacting, had a little bit of difficulty with feeding, so couldn't quite latch on and all those type of things. But um for, APGAR scores were 999 when he was born, and really there was no indication that there was anything, um that no concerns. The pediatricians didn't have any concerns. So it was quite a severe drop. Like, he changed overnight. And then, of
Mm.
course, you have the let's load them up with every medication under the sun, which is, of course, completely, shut him down. So, look, I have to say the first 2 years were a blur for us. And I don't know that we had that sense of, I think, and a lot of young mothers would, with children with medically complex, diagnosis, would kind of think, okay, what can we do to fix this?
Yeah.
What's the fixing? And what we'll do is we'll throw everything at fixing. It doesn't matter. We won't sleep. We won't eat. We won't have contact with our friends. We'll just, you know, go full force at this.
Yeah.
And that's a normal, natural way of reacting,
It
given that
is.
the doctors just
Don't
said,
know.
we don't know. And you're thinking,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to influence that don't know until we do know.
Yeah.
So I think I spent that first 2 years of, Eric was born in September 2005, so most of 2006, 2007 was just, and I can't tell you, Rita, the things that we did.
That was my next question. You went from being heard, we don't know, and you went in full power force, driven to find answers. In those 2 years, what did you discover and what did you implement?
Well, you really want to know? I mean, we tried to research as much as we could. This was, there weren't Facebook groups, there weren't things like that. There were Google, I think they were not Google, Yahoo groups that you could
Yeah.
join, where somebody had tried something, and then you'd say, oh, they've tried this, let's try that. Or, we went to Chinese medicine, we did hyperbaric oxygen therapy, you just sort of, and the expense and the money and it just nothing. And, I think that was really top draining, but at the same time, you have to feel like you're doing something. So it's a
Completely
really tricky
understand.
balance
Mm.
between wanting to help your child and feeling um, that what if you miss something? What if there's something that you could do that, that's going to be the answer? And I think that kind of went along. I think I lost probably about, 20 kilos in the first few months.
Mm.
I didn't sleep. I just, we basically, Eric was having seizures every hour on the hour, night and day, um, which is surprising that I actually ended up in 2007 having my second son.
Yeah.
Not sure where that happened along the way, but it somehow happened. Um, um,
Alignment is what I
um,
call
hey?
alignment.
Yeah. So it was almost 2 years later when I had my second son. And of course, I think that kind of changed everything. You just don't have that ability to, um, and I think I started to realize it. I think it's a funny story I tell, but I went to see this, someone said the best Chinese medicine doctor in Melbourne. And I went to visit him and he sits on a throne and he has these people that talk on his behalf. And he said to me, and look, this has probably worked for some for centuries, but he said to me, you have to find a silver coin and you have to boil an egg and you have to smash it on your child's head when the wind blows. And this was I'd waited for months to get an appointment with him. And then I went home and I asked my family and friends who's got a silver coin, and we found one and we boiled the eggs. And I was sitting there smashing this silver coin on my son's head and with that egg. And I just got this epiphany and I said, enough,
Yeah.
just stop. Like enough is enough. Like you can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
Um, and this little boy, this gorgeous little boy looking up at me like, what are you doing, mum? You know? And I think that was where I sort of thought, I think we're going to have to change a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, So that's a kind of my experience of motherhood, at least. And then of course I had Marcus, who was, you know, just so active from the first moment he came out that he was, practically an adult. So I was, always trying to juggle the two boys.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was done by myself, um, husband at work.
Yeah.
It was just, about basically just about survival. In those days, we didn't have much in the way of um, respite or NDIS or anything like
Mm.
that. So it was just really that sort of survival. But at the same time, I started to band together with some other families who were also going through similar situations. And we were able to support each other. And I spent a lot of time, we all spent a lot of time advocating for each other, and
Mm.
we had to apply for funding in different there were different block funding that was around. You couldn't just get one funding from the government like you can with NDIS. You had to
Mm.
find out where you lived had some sort of block. So we would advocate for each other, and we would learn all the processes, the applications, because you had to apply for funding, and we would just all start doing this sort of thing. And I became quite I think I became quite skilled at kind of trying to figure out how to access services, and how to help people who just really didn't know where to go. And that's
Yeah.
just sort of developed, I suppose.
You've beautifully described like a journey, a place of feeling overwhelmed to then isolation to then trying anything, somewhat of a desperation trying to access a service to support your child, to then being in that flight, fight, survival mode, to then having an awakening of belonging and community, which then turned you to a different path of advocacy and empowerment. It's like a sense of you took your pain and used your pain as a sense of purpose, which I feel is so liberating, and not only for yourself and your family, but for so many other families too that share the same lived experience. Let's talk about how that community now. How How is that so important for special need parents to be with a group that understand what you're going through?
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. Um, Out of that sort of advocacy work, there were a couple of groups that I joined. And, like all groups, there's going to be some people that you gel with and some people that you don't. And just because you have
Mm,
children with disabilities doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the best of friends.
yeah.
Um, and all children with disabilities are different. My son didn't meet any milestones, has yet to meet any milestones, is the same as he was when he was 4.5 months of age, and now he's 20. So,
Mhm,
um, and I the one thing that I found that we have in common, not because our children have the same disability, but because we have the same worries and we have the same hopes and we have the same desire to be seen as individuals, not just parents as well.
yeah.
So I think when you find that group, and I was really lucky, Eric did early intervention at a place called the Cerebral Palsy Education Centre in Melbourne.
Mhm.
And parents were involved in all of that. So it was a multidisciplinary team, and you'd sit there and you'd do all sort of activities. And I think that early group was amazing, and that they're a sisterhood. And a brotherhood as well, because there was fathers as well,
Yep.
that have really supported me, and I've supported them, and it's been a really great connection. And we have shared things, but it's not necessarily the same experience. And that's
Yeah.
okay. And that community becomes a protective factor for the things that are going to get thrown at you as
Yeah.
your child grows up. There's so many transitions in life, to school, um, to adulthood, to, child development happens on a life course. So it's a life
Mm.
course trajectory. And, in the beginning, you're thinking, I need this piece of equipment, but you know, in a year's time, you need something different or you need that. So it's this constant, sharing, hey, we've been suggested this. What do you think of this? And just that really, and having that is, I think, a real protective factor to be able to cope with all those things that come.
It's like you set up your own Yahoo group, but face to face.
Yes, absolutely. And there are so
I'm
many
so happy
opportunities
for you that you did that.
nowadays. There are so many opportunities
Yeah.
nowadays to connect with people, but that can also be a double-edged sword, because just having access to so much information,
It's
and so
overwhelming.
many, this is what people are doing, on social media. Do I measure up as a parent because I'm seeing what everybody
Mm.
else is doing? Maybe I should have done more, or maybe and so that can be helpful, but it can also be a hindrance. So I think having real connections, and having that opportunity to share ideas, um, is something that I advocate for. Um,
Yeah.
in and I think, yeah, just having that opportunity to seek out your tribe and be supported to do that is, I will tell every single parent of a child with
Yeah.
a diagnosis, disability, or medically complex.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you name or just go into depth of to what are the biggest challenges that you faced as a parent when you're supporting Eric?
One of the things that I think doesn't get talked about a lot, and there's so many things I could talk to you about parenting a child that's got medical complexities. Um, I have found that people, uh, I guess, you're expected to have this linear progression. You get a diagnosis, you go through those, oh my God, desperation moments, got to fix this. And then you get through that, and then everything's okay. It might not be okay, but it's your new normal. But what people don't understand is that, one day, 10 years down the track, can be as hard as one day, 4 months down the track.
Yeah.
It's not linear, the way you
Mm.
feel, and the hard or the easy. So I could have had an easy day when Eric was 6 months,
Yeah.
and I can have a hard day when Eric was 6 years. And it doesn't just go like get easier. It ebbs and flows
Mm.
depending on what happens in your life, how well you're able to be taken care of or take care of yourself, or have others take care of you, or hold space for you. That's another really big, it's kind of a bit of a buzzword, holding space, but, you know, it's often difficult, particularly for me, that my child didn't have the happy super mum. She didn't listen to those doctors and she did everything, and then the happy ending happened. It
Yeah.
didn't happen. Where's that voice? Where
Yeah.
I couldn't find any voices like that. And so that's one of the hardest things that I found is like I could find people who had children with disabilities and they were so great for me and we had that, but there was still this missing, there still is this missing gap. What happens to those kids who don't have successes despite therapies,
Yeah.
despite doctors, despite medical advances, but they're the kids that are still going 20 years later.
Mm.
My son is still going through daily seizures,
Mm.
no development. But the love that we have for him is just like we would keep doing this journey for. I'll keep doing this journey for
Yeah.
till I'm old and grey, which is kind of a bit daunting too. But at the same time, it's that I just found it difficult. I didn't know where my space was. I didn't know. Most people wanted me to be okay, and I was okay, and I am okay, but that doesn't stop you from feeling okay and sad. Two things can be true. You
Mm.
can feel
So understand.
devastated and grieving, and one day can be bad and one day can be good. But it's still the heartbreak is there. Yeah. So that's been really that balance is difficult.
I really appreciate your openness about that because on Wine with Wita and even in my clinic space, I treat children with medical needs, but not as complex as Eric's. And so we always aim for milestones and reaching just those small success points. But given the complexity of Eric's disability, he is still where he was in many areas where he was initially diagnosed. And I think that is such a hard pill for individuals to swallow, going with all this advocacy and all this intervention. What's the outcome? And it makes the like outsiders think, not even think, but they don't even understand the depths of it. And how did you cope with that? More like it came with the acceptance and just to be present in the moment and enjoy the slightest wins with him.
Yeah, yeah. I I did follow. I didn't. So I found it hard. I couldn't see that pathway because all the pathways in
Mm.
front of me were try this, do this,
Yeah.
and all the messages I was getting was, we never gave up, and in the end, it all worked out, or something like that. So yeah, and I couldn't see any other alternative. But I think it did happen obviously when I crashed that thing on my son's head when he was 2 and I was just like, "What am I doing?" But again, I remember I still persisted. We went to early intervention. I had the pod books. I had you know, I had everything, and he would just like I'd put a pod book in front of him and he would just have a seizure and fall asleep.
Yeah.
I'd be like,
Yeah.
or I'd had a therapist who'd say, "Oh, look, he's nodding his head," and I'd be like, "Oh God, he's having a seizure. Should I tell her?" Like he's not
Yeah.
actually nodding because you're pointing to the right compic. Like it was. So then it was about making everyone around me okay with it. Um,
Mm.
but anyway, so it's that you go through those motions because you don't know what else, because there is no what else.
Mm.
But I think
Yep.
there is a what else, and that is that sense of, oh my God, look at you, you're absolutely adorable, and we're just going to do life. We're just going to, we're just going to, you're going to be with me, and we're just going to do stuff. And and some days, you know, look, I mean, eventually we stopped doing things because we thought we should. We did the
Mm.
things that we wanted to do as a family.
Yep.
And did it look different to how other people would be doing things as a family? Yes, certainly did. But we were okay with that in the
Yeah.
end. And I think that's been, um, yeah, that's sort of a shift. But I didn't have anyone to model that. I didn't know that it was possible that you could try everything and still not have those outcomes that you want. Um, but that would be okay still.
Yeah. I love that. I love that despite this unspoken expectation, it's okay not to meet them because your world is very different. And just because this family can do it that way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. And I feel that's the pressure parents feel, especially as you mentioned earlier, the social media aspect. Oh, this mum did this and they had success. Why haven't I done that? I'm not good enough. I feel guilty for not applying it. And that just is just not necessary for families or any parent going through this intervention journey with their child because it's very individualized.
And one mother said to me once, because I remember he had orthotics, AFOs on his feet,
Mm.
and I was looking at something else, and I met a mother at the hospital, and her son didn't have any AFOs on, but I could see that he had a very similar cerebral palsy in a physical presentation to my son. And I said, "Oh, does he not wear AFOs?" And she goes, "No." And I said, "Oh, can you just
Why?
not wear AF? Can you
Yeah.
not wear AFOs? Like Eric hated them." And she goes, "You can do whatever you want." It was this other mother, and she just looked at me and she says, "You can do whatever you want." And I was like, "Can I? Can I? Really?" "Yes, actually, I can." Didn't know
How
that. Didn't
liberating.
know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow. And I guess that just reinforces being around people in the same lived experience too.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier finding time for you to care for yourself. And given that Eric was having seizures every hour, how did you find time to care for yourself or to fill your cup in the best way that you could in the moment?
Having those friends on call, yes.
Yeah.
Um, I think taking some things off my plate. So it's that emptying out, like getting rid of the unnecessary busy work
Yeah.
so that you have more time to focus on the things that need to be done. So a lot of things that kind of seemed important kind of actually weren't that important in the end. Um,
Yeah.
can't say that I didn't do a bit of online shopping. Um, and I remember
That's the
this is
paramount thing you need to do.
you know, but one of the things, what the funniest stories that I tell, and I still laugh at myself, is that they used to be with when you bought things online, you could have the option, and I'm showing my age of, you know, but you could have something gift wrapped, and it'd say, "Would you like a card with that?" And so I would say yes to the gift wrapping, and yes to the card. It would say, "What would you like to write on that card?" And I would write on that card, "Hey, Rose, hope you're having a great day. Thought you'd like this. You're doing a great job." And then it wasn't like Amazon, it wouldn't come the next day. It might take a week to come. And then after a week, I'd forgotten that I'd done that. And I'd open the door and there'd be a gift wrap present for me with my name on it and with this nice card. It was so silly, but
I think I
for
might do
some
that for
reason,
myself.
it
Did it
just
fill your
it
cup?
it filled my cup. It really filled my cup. Yeah. So really simple little things. Yeah, just tiny, tiny things that, you might think, "Oh, I can't do yoga on the beach." No, you can't do yoga on the beach, but you can do
But
that.
you can shop on Iconic, buy yourself a pretty pair of shoes, gift wrap them, and send it to yourself. And you'll come the next
And I
day.
know that can be out of a lot of people's reach, to do that, and it wasn't like I could afford to do that with having not being able to go to work or whatever, but it was just even little things I was g tiny, tiny little things. It was even just, stuff for the boys, like I'd order,
Yeah.
um, clothes that the boys need, singlets and stuff like that, so it wasn't as though they were, great, Christian Louboutin shoes or whatever. They were
No,
just like,
no, no.
you
No,
know,
not at all, not at all.
Bonds
But
Bonds
it's the
singlets.
but it's the idea of you've gifted something to yourself to look forward to getting because the reality of you going to the shops and splurging on yourself was quite unrealistic, but you still met that need in a different way. And I think for any parent listening here, just because your world was different to what you expected does not mean you cannot change it to meet you where you're at. And you are in control of the narrative of how you self care for yourself. Just because so and so put a picture up of them doing yoga on the beach or having coffee with a friend does not mean you cannot find your own happiness. And I think this is a big message I'd love to share on this podcast, really believing in your own path and knowing how far you can come by believing in your own capacity too.
Yeah. Yeah. But, it's hard because you get worn down. You
Yeah.
get worn down, you get really tired. And as parents, we often have to, there are so many systems we have to navigate,
Mm,
um, particularly in Australia with the NDIS and the way it is at the moment. And this has led to me also, I work as a support coordinator and, really trying to help families to build their capacity to kind of navigate these systems, and they keep changing the goalposts and the systems and the rules.
mm.
And, it's that sense of overwhelm that really so many parents are faced with.
Yeah.
There are people that want to help. There are programs that can help. There are people that, there are good people and there are people that aren't as supportive. But you just,
Mm,
I think if you, we talk a lot in the Envisage program about values. And I think if you try to get in touch with your values as a person, what feels right to me? And people go, values, what's a value? But it's that, what feels right to me? And you often know that something is not right. You get that feeling that this doesn't align with, this makes me feel a bit, I'm not sure, a
mm,
bit off, And that's kind of where okay, this person or this task or this program that I'm thinking my son or daughter needs to do, it doesn't feel right with me, doesn't sit well with me, well, then that's probably because it's something that doesn't match your values.
mm, mm. That's an important message. Thank you. Now, let's talk about Envisage. In your role
Mm.
with Envisage and as an NDIS support coordinator, you've mentioned that you help them support parents understand the values, but how else do you help families feel empowered in control of their support?
Uh, so within Envisage or just in
Within
general?
Envisage. Oh, how about we talk about
Yeah.
Envisage first and then
Yes,
we'll
I
talk
was
about
thinking we might.
NDIS support?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd
Yeah.
separate it. We'll do Envisage first.
I think so. Envisage, I'm not sure that if you know much about the program, but it's a program that I was involved since 2017. So we developed this program
Mhm.
as a series of 5 workshops that parents could attend, and they could attend online. And this was prior to COVID, so prior to, no one knew what Zoom was when we first started, but it was this research. It was an international collaboration with some researchers from Canada and Australia, and I was one of the parent contributors to that research. And we really we'd asked a lot of families, and we had our own lived experience about, what do you wish somebody had told you back then, which is a little bit like what we're talking about, that you wish you would have known. And there was a lot of
Mm,
toing and froing because of, obviously you have to walk through a path to get somewhere, right? So you can't tell everyone everything and they go, oh, thanks for telling me, now I know. They've got to go through that process. But there's also been a lot of research into early childhood disability, and there's been a lot
yeah.
of research into how children thrive by doing uh, having everyday experiences. So you don't have to have them doing things the right way. They just have to get involved in whatever capacity that they can, or even if they can't, then you just have them involved in your family just the
Mm,
way you can. So these were the sorts of things that we came across in the research, and then we created these workshops. And we were lucky enough to be funded by the Australian government to actually, let families access these workshops for free. We've been doing that for the last 3 years, and our grant has been extended for the next 2 years. So we can actually offer the program all across Australia. What it
it's
involves
wonderful.
is families, each week they meet for an hour or 90 minutes online. There's a service provider and a parent peer who facilitate the program. So we try to model that collaborative approach where parents and service, it's not the service provider who's the expert or the parent
Yeah.
who's the expert, but they all have expertise. And that through collaboration, you can actually find what works for your child and for your family. So that's really what the Envisage program is about. And so I became involved in that in 2017. And of course, since we've been rolling out the program, have been involved in sort of training facilitators all across Australia. And really, we want throughout all of our work, we always model that sort of approach of collaboration, and we try to bring in that early childhood research as well because it's really important. And
Early
we
intervention
do
as well.
actively research, and we actively publish all the results of the work that we do. So it's an evidence-based program as well. But
Mm.
from all accounts, the feedback that we get from families is that they feel more competent and confident to actually meet all those many things that we've talked about that come your way.
Yeah. I absolutely love how you said that phrase. You've got the caseworker, you've got the parent. There's no one that's the expert, but everyone has their expertise where they come together and collaborate for the child or the client to create the best outcome. And I absolutely love that because in my own clinic space, parents just think I'm the expert. I can make the child talk. But I say, no, no, no. You know your child. You're the expert in your child. I just know the evidence based practice and clinical side of things. Let's collaborate together to create the magic together for your child. And anyone that's listening, every healthcare professional, any professional is not just the expert, but your team member as well.
Mm. And one of my colleagues, a beautiful, also mum to a medically complex child, one of our Canadian parent peers. So we have parent peers in Canada and Australia, and she's one of our researchers, and she talks about textbooks versus storybooks. And
Yes.
I've got the storybook, you've got the textbook.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
let's learn it. Let's tell the story in a different way. You might have a chapter here, I have a chapter there, and that's all part of that thing. And the interesting thing is that you might be saying, well, isn't this obvious? Like, shouldn't it always be about that? Or shouldn't we always look at the strengths of our children, which is one of the biggest things that we sort of talk about in Envisage? Actually, no. You hear, and in my
Mm.
work as a support coordinator, when a young family will get funding, although mainly, you know, they'll like, right, I need 35 sessions at least in the first 6 months with this therapist and this therapist and this therapist. And you're like, well, okay, there's a place for that. There certainly is a place for that. But if you think you can just take your child there to somehow change who they are, or, there's lots of
Fix.
things. Yeah, fix is the
Mm.
word, and it's a really outdated assumption, um,
Mm.
but it's still happening. Yeah,
Let's change the narrative on this podcast. It's not about fixing, it's about supporting and focusing on your child's capacity, what they can do rather than what they cannot do. Yeah, so
100%,
important.
100%.
Now, let's talk more about you as an NDIS support worker and what you do to empower parents as well.
Yeah, so as a support coordinator, it's basically, families are funded in, not all families, but some families are funded to have that person who can help kind of walk them through that process of, you get this plan, but you can't spend it on this, but you can spend it on this, but uh, can only, and so I don't know how they expect it's just, it's such a, it's supposed to be a person-centered
Yeah.
approach. It feels very like you need to have a law degree or you know, it's quite complex. So it's complex to
Mm.
navigate. And so, as I said, from years and years of navigating funding systems for children with disabilities, people, don't understand that, we had only a certain amount of funding that you could pay, say, for a wheelchair, and then everything else you had to fundraise. We were running fundraisers.
Mm.
Parents back in the day were doing fundraisers. So it's a bit better than that. You can say, hey, my therapist thinks that I need this communication device, or I need this wheelchair, or I need, um, and it will be funded. But I've got to make sure that that evidence is robust enough to justify a planner decision. So I'm
Mm.
often involved in that kind of, yes, I know you think you need this, and I agree, and your therapist agree, but let's make sure that we tick all the boxes so that we can get that funding that you need in a timely manner.
Mm.
Um, or let's have a look at your plan and see how you can use that funding that you have been allocated and that the NDIS deems reasonable and necessary and let's see how we can make that work. And let me help you
Yeah.
find providers, and let me help you to connect with providers who have the values that you have. So it's not just about that, it's about what do you want for your child and family? What do you, or what do you want for yourself if I'm not dealing with a parent, which often I am. But don't do things, or don't just because you think you have to. All the providers that you engage with need to add value to your life.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love that, Rose, because you mentioned earlier in the piece when you were a young mum, you just took on everything to try to get all the support needed. And you've just repeated that now as a caseworker, saying you don't need to do everything right now. And as a speechy, I have so many parents that come with a non-speaking child and immediately want to start the funding path to get the AAC device. But it's not needed yet. Don't overwhelm yourself with this big decision when there are so many steps required for your child's development in order for them to use this device. Right now, let's focus on what we can achieve and actually what is your capacity, right? And the values that you can currently link and align now, because the reality is when you're aligned to your values and they're achievable, you will achieve success. Yeah. And it's like going to the gym
absolutely.
expecting to deadlift 70 kilos when you can't even do 10. Like
No,
it's the
but families will
reality.
say that. They'll go, "I saw this kid had this, and I
Yeah.
need this, and I need this, and I need this," and
Yeah.
and then actually, when you get all of this, they're not the it's not the they're not, it's not the magic wand either,
No,
because
it's not.
everything requires work. And as you said, you get a great communication device where you're going to have to train everyone in your child's environment, and they're going to have to understand how to use it. And so, but it might be easier to have a few signs, or a few, pictures, or there could be a few things that you could do, or even just we call it the dance, but basically learning to read your child's cues and signals.
Yeah.
Now, even though I talk about Eric having not developed, if he makes a certain noise, I know that that noise means he needs to be changed,
Yeah.
or he's uncomfortable.
Mm.
So over time, if you listen and you just allow that space to actually read those signals and interpret those cues, then y- it might it might be much better than years and years of trying to like I said, trying
You
to use a
learn how to
plug
learn a
book,
device. Yeah. Yeah. I
and
had a
Eric
mum
couldn't use any of that.
Yeah, I had a mum the other day make a beautiful comment. Her son has a global developmental delay. She goes, I had to relearn what communication meant for my child now. So in her mind, she has two other children that were speaking, but at this stage, her son, whenever he made a specific vowel sound like that meant he needed to be changed. And when he would deviate the R sound to with a different tone, that meant he was tired. So it's like, and I love that she said that because that's what communication is about. Understanding where your child is at, connecting with them at the level that they're at, supporting them to then further succeed rather than having expectations that he will use sentences on a device within 2 months or so. Yeah.
And it's tricky because a lot of us actually don't know how to communicate and know how to listen. We're getting so
No.
much information so fast at us all the time. Like I see it with my almost 18-year-old, my youngest son, and it's that constant, what's next?
Mm,
We're looking for this information to come to us.
mm,
Sometimes it's not about looking for the next thing, it's just about stopping and waiting. So I think, what we're doing in Visage as well is that sense of, we say to people, it might be tricky to, those cues and signals don't come in the way that they might for other kids, you
mm.
know? So if you're looking for those things, you might be looking for something that you won't find. But maybe if you just stop looking, maybe it
You'll
will
see
come.
it. Yeah, yeah. I
And
love
we talk
that.
about, yeah, yeah. Go
Sorry,
on.
sorry to interrupt you, Rose. In my clinic space, obviously, I'm capped to a certain amount of time to be not only a therapist for the child, but also support for the parent. And you provide so much optimism and support in that moment. But as a clinician, it is so refreshing to know that there are programs like Envisage, not to provide support for the child, but for the parents' emotional well being. And when you give them information around expectations, values, support, and letting them reframe their mind or reframe the narrative, that unspokenly trickles down to the child and their therapy progress. So, for any parent listening, I feel like having a support network or a village of parents with lived experience, but also connecting with other services, like in Rose's case, she's an NDIS support worker. Her lived experience, along with her expertise in that industry, will help you far more than what you actually are aware of.
Yeah, yeah. Try and parents need to just sort of trust themselves, but also trust that it's not gonna be okay all of the time, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And that's
Mm.
okay, and that's where you have to be really kind to yourself. And I think that's, when parents give us feedback from the Envisage program, they're like, "Oh, it's not like you gave me any, like, it's not like I had, but I felt like I had permission to just go, oh, okay, we can be who we are, you know?
Yeah.
Just felt that constant, we have to fix or we have to tend." And, as we said, the best outcomes are the outcomes that allow children to be who they are and who they're meant to be. And I've come around to that
Mm.
acceptance of my son is who he is and who he's meant to be. And that's really meaningful and powerful for our family.
That's so beautiful, Rose. I think that's for everyone. If we can just accept people for who they are and who they're meant to be, I think it would resolve a lot of problems in the world just by that. Thank you for that honesty. For any parent listening, I feel incredibly in awe of Rose and the humor that she also shares on this podcast. I feel like I'm giggling to her side comments. I think it's actually quite beautiful. But for anyone wanting to connect or understand more about the Envisage program, I'll put all the details in the show notes. And I'm feeling it here in this conversation. It is such a powerful and supportive support network that any parent with a special needs child or medically complex child would incredibly benefit from. So thanks, Rose,
Yeah,
for
or even
sharing
if
that.
you have a even if you there's no diagnosis, so you don't need a
Oh,
diagnosis to access Envisage. It's fully funded. So even just a developmental concern, I mean, anyone can attend, but you'd get probably more out of it if it's a developmental concern. You've got a few concerns, you're not quite sure, you may
yeah.
not have a diagnosis yet, you don't need an NDIS plan, you can just sign up for free and come along to these workshops. So really easy.
Oh, see, anyone then can apply, especially if you're questioning if your child has some concerns there. Now, looking forward, Rose, what are your hopes for the support available for special need families and envisaged families too?
Look, I just think I really hope, we hear of some families who, we are delivering Envisage in language as well. So hoping that we can reach more.
Nice.
We've got a First Nations program, so reaching those First Nations communities, which are so diverse across Australia. We have the programs that are delivered in language. We just ran a Vietnamese program recently. So
Mm.
there are families who might not be able to access information because of the language barriers and things like that. So I guess we just, as we talk about that level playing field for everybody, everyone being able to access information, everybody being able to be supported. Um, it's. I think that whole idea of fixing. I hope we can move away from that,
Yeah.
and really seeing. But some children really benefit, and amazing things happen. It's just that everyone has their pathway.
Yeah.
And I think I would like to see a lot more support in education. I think that's one of the areas we haven't moved into with Envisage, but
Mhm.
we're interested in looking at, how do you support educators? How do we support the school support workers and the teachers? Because
Mm.
I feel like they are the front line with a lot of our children with disabilities and developmental concerns and ASD and all those sorts of things. And they've got a lot on their plate. And so I'd love
Yeah.
to think if there'd be ways to support those people that are on the front line supporting the families.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. What a beautiful hope. I love that. Now, Rose, before we finish up, I ask all my guests a question. If you were to be a better version of yourself tomorrow, Rose, what word will you apply to yourself today?
Oh, patience.
Like we all need that.
Yeah, a little bit of patience, a little bit of obviously, I my fight or flight is often quite, overactive, given that I have to always be responsive to my son.
Yeah.
So that is okay for that, but in other areas, I probably need to just chill a bit. Maybe chill's the word.
Chill, patient, it's all the same, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. I love it.
I'll work
Now
on
for
that. I'll work on that. Thanks, Rita.
everyone, I hope you feel patient, chilled, and even empowered by Rose's remarkable story on Wine with Wita today. As I said earlier, if you want to know more about Envisage, all the details are in the show notes. It's for free. Sign up, and it's only a short time for you to receive that support. So please, it's a gift to yourself. It's the gift wrapped, Rose. It's the gift from Rose wrapped to you. I love it. I love it. For everyone else, thank you for joining Wine with Wita today. And I look forward to sharing another a story with you next week. Take care, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Wine with Wita. I hope you found some new inspiration, learnt something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you please leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it takes 5 seconds. If you're keen for more strategies and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow RS Speech Pathology.